Yes.
Last time I taught, I was spending time with you. I was in California. I had just spent a couple hours with Francis Chan, which was an amazing meeting. And then I went back a few days later to California and debated Richard Carrier, the historian and anti-Christian atheist. It's interesting. I was in touch with a prominent philosopher in the evangelical world just this morning, and he was telling me how he's using that debate to help other students, which was really encouraging. Then, I guess about 2 weeks later, Joy Harris and I and my wife Vicki went to South Florida, where we were teaching a material. We did 2 days on family life, did 2 days on homiletics, which was a blast, and then a couple more days just working with the church. On my own apologetics side, I'm doing a short course on Nietzsche right now, 24 lessons, and I just finished 2 days ago a book on divine providence, 4 views. And I think one of the important things about apologetics is you have to keep current. I always feel a little sad when I meet someone who says, well, I read more than a carpenter 20 years ago, and isn't that enough? No, it's really not. We've got to take it deeper, and we need to constantly learn. So what I thought I would share in these 2 classes, Apologetics 1 and 2, is recent material. I was in Europe teaching on apologetics with a very unbelieving and very actually atheistic audience. And then I retooled the material a little bit when I was in Korea a few weeks ago. I just haven't bothered to retitle it, Canadian School of Missions. But today, we'll begin the material. We'll cover Roman numeral 1 of the plan and then number 2. And as I begin 1, I actually want you to see how I sometimes introduce myself when I'm speaking to unbelieving audiences. It's very different with you. We have so many things in common. I can make many assumptions, though I don't want to be presumptuous. But with an audience of seekers, particularly like when I was in Norway, when most of the audience are atheists, you have to be careful not to be too preachy. So I usually I introduce myself. I'll admit, okay, obviously I'm not unbiased completely. I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian, for a while now, and and you're watching the PowerPoint, I hope, because otherwise you're going to miss everything. We all have a bias. I admit that the lenses that I have, I really need this. If I take these off, I can still see you, but it's not so clear. I really need these. I have a bias. I see things through Christian lenses. For me, this makes sense. The world makes more sense than in other views. But I'm not claiming complete objectivity. I'm still a learner, okay? And because I came to faith when I was at university, I ended up working, I tell them, I was a minister for 20 years, and now this decade I'm independent, I'm freelance. But I really believe that Christianity makes sense, and so I spend a good amount of my time recording and writing and even traveling around the world because people are hungry. We're spiritual creatures, and we're longing to learn. That's what I do. Often, though, in interactions between Christians and others, there's bad will, bad blood. I think we have to be very careful when we're talking about groups or individuals when they're not there to defend themselves. We have to be careful not to misrepresent them. I mean, I could say something now, for example, about the Hindus or maybe the Mormons. Well, unless they're Hindus in my audience or Mormons on the stage with me, I have to go the extra mile not to caricature what they believe. I don't want anyone to misrepresent what I think, and I know you don't want that either. So it's very important that we're not making straw man arguments, that we're, in a way, comparing the best of the Bible with the best of atheism, or the best of Christianity with the best of Islam. What we often do, come on, admit it. Let's compare the best of Christianity with the worst of Islam. It's not really a fair comparison. No misrepresentation. There needs to be a respectfulness. Some people think, in our current climate, that if you believe at all, that you're irrational. Well, I don't think it's irrational to believe, particularly if you have an experience. To say, well, experience is irrational. Well, your experience could be purely subjective, it could have, however, an objective basis. But there's nothing in terms of logic that's irrational about having experience. And maybe one more comment here. Remember, in the New Testament, Paul tells Timothy to be respectful to those who have a different view, not to get into fruitless arguments. I'm aware in the academic world, argument is not a bad word. Argument means making your case, moving from premise to another premise, eventually to the conclusion. That's a good thing. But of course, probably in another sense, argument is something to be avoided. We have to understand there are two different senses. I was in Oxford, well, now I guess it's been a year and a half. I was at a hotel room in Oxford, and I found a Bible in the drawer by the bed. It's interesting, when I travel around the world, a few weeks ago, I opened up the drawer by my bed, and it was the Bhagavad Gita. And then another place I pulled out, it was the Quran. Well, this one was the Bible, because England is kind of quasi-Christian, or it used to be. And an atheist clearly had written in the Bible, in the front page there, in the cover, warning fiction. He wrote that in blue ink, and underneath that was written in pencil, this reference, clearly by a Bible believer. And if you don't know it right away, I'm studying the Psalms. Last time I finished reading the whole Bible was in the autumn, and since then I've been reading all the Psalms once a week. It's been great. It's been so helpful. But I continue to do that, just like it was last time we spoke. Anyway, that's Psalm 92, 5-6. And you can see what it says. Particularly look at verse 6. Anyone who would write fiction in the front of the Bible, well, senseless people do not know, fools do not understand. That's not really very helpful if we're trying to win over people who don't believe. It's not helpful at all. And there's a lot of writing and invective, a lot of emails I receive are meant to help us to triumph over our atheist foes, and it's that note of contempt or sarcasm or triumphalism that I think really hurts our case. Kind of like when the young earth creationists think they're paving the way for faith, they don't really understand that most people they're really turning off. We may not give in to one fallacy, but our tone, our spirit is so important. And I'm just trying to establish the ground rules, whether we're doing presentations or having a debate or a dialogue. I think it's very important at the beginning to admit that we are subjective, that we think we're right. Of course, it's possible we're wrong as Christians. Maybe we're partly right, or maybe we're delusional. Actually, the guy I debated in Sacramento a couple weeks ago, he thinks that Christians are, pretty much delusional. But even with him, I tried to show great respect. And after the debate, and I think you can find it it's online. We just haven't put it up at IPI yet. I had a Facebook link a couple weeks ago. But even with him, after the debate, privately, I asked him, Richard, did you feel I was fair? Did you feel I was respectful? And he gave affirmative answers to both of those. You were very respectful, you were professional, but people love this. And he brought a lot of visitors himself. I mean, there are a lot of atheists in the audience, and I'm even in email correspondence now. These guys, they really thought it was a great event. And that's what we want, not because, well, we entertained them, though who knows, but because there was a genuine engagement at some level. And I know I'm not really giving you apologetic material right now. Maybe this morning you want to load up on ammunition. Well, I'm going to give you some stuff in a moment. But I think the spirit is so important. It's better to have the right spirit and just make one or two good points than to, have an arsenal of slam dunk arguments. But have the wrong spirit, and that could really mess people up. So I've mentioned my debates. As you can see, I guess it's turning out to be about one a year. And each one of these has a story to it. And the fun thing for me is all the people I've debated are well known. They're all well-known television personalities and well-known in the academic world. And I think that helps me as the underdog to come in and hopefully surprise them. So, enough introduction. Why believe in the God of the Bible? The biblical picture of God is reasonable. And this is where I want to start. But first, we deal with some false issues. And you always have to clear the ground. You have to clear away some of the debris before you can really erect a structure on stable ground. You don't want the foundation to collapse. You have to deal with some of the debris. And one of those false issues is that religion does more harm than good. It's commonly asserted by the main atheists of today. Until last year, that would have been Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Christopher Hitchens, and Sam Harris. One of those is recently died, but there's always another atheist to take his place. And some of them, I think particularly Sam Harris, religion does more harm than good. Well, I think if we're talking to an unbeliever, we need to admit there is a lot of truth in that. And yet, I think we have to go deeper. Many evil things are done in the name of religion, but the search for justifications is a human tendency. I think most of the harm, wars, most of the times coercion or torture used, I don't think it has much to do directly with religion. I think it's much more economics. In that respect, I would agree with Marx. It's really about money, but if you can find a heavenly pretext for your actions, so much the better. You can fire up the crowd. So I think many things are done in the name of religion, not necessarily because the religion causes it, but because it makes a fine justification for it. And yet, at the same time, some religions are intrinsically more violent than others. And how do we know? We look at the history, we look at their scriptures, and we meet their representatives. And sadly, through most of its history, Christianity would fall into this category of being a violent religion, closely allied with the state. And we know that that's not Christianity, but it is certainly the impression that people have. When in December, when I was in those dialogues and presentations with those two universities in Bangladesh with the Muslim professors, I was acutely aware that they are looking at me not just as a representative of Christianity to them as Muslims, but they're looking at me as representatives of the West in a way of imperialism. I think we have to give in when people make a criticism where we can, and then because that diffuses the situation. But then make a thoughtful point, and this is the point I try to make, that people treat people lousy anyway. They do it in the name of all kinds of things. But if you can do it in the name of Christ or the name of Muhammad or the name of whoever, that's better for them. Another false issue, of course, is that believers are hypocrites. And when I bring this one up, I'll say, okay, so you think believers are hypocrites and non-believers aren't? You're completely consistent? And of course, I'm hypocritical in some ways. I hope I'm not a hypocrite. I hope that doesn't describe my life. I mean, we all slip up. You know, people say, well, there are just too many hypocrites in the church. And one preacher said, don't worry, there's always room for one more. You're welcome to come. Somehow we need to admit, yeah, there's been enormous hypocrisy, and Jesus himself preached against this. Matthew 7. The prophets preached against this. The whole Bible is against hypocrisy. But there's a difference between the product and the salesman. Maybe it's not the best analogy, but you could be a hypocritical salesman, but what you're selling could actually be something very good. You could be delivering a message that's true, even though you're not a person of good character. I mean, just if the town drunk tells you the building's on fire, it doesn't mean he's wrong. We have to somehow separate the message and the messenger, though in terms of our credibility, we cannot separate them. Because for most people, our lives, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we live, the standard of living at which we are, the vocabulary we use, all of that, it's part of our credibility. It puts people off or it brings them in. You can't really separate. It's not just an academic exercise. So in a way, Jesus is the message, but in a way that we cannot avoid, we are the message. 2 Corinthians 2, we're the aroma of Christ. And for some people, we're the only Bible they'll ever read. We're the only Jesus they'll ever see. Anyway, I'm preaching to the choir on that one. But to say believers are hypocrites, that actually has nothing to do with God, with the existence of God. If anything, it suggests the opposite, because why are people hypocritical? Because they're imitating righteousness. The fact that hypocrisy exists suggests that there is a righteous standard. If there were no such thing as truth, ultimate truth, or absolute morality, or a God in heaven, then why would we even think about hypocrisy? Hypocrisy always involves some sense of imitation and deceit. You're disingenuous. You want to lead people on. You want to lead them with the wrong impression, a better impression. Believers are hypocrites. That's got nothing to do with the existence of God. In my case, because I'm from North America, and certainly there's a much better feeling worldwide towards the Canadians, but the truth is anyone from the West is a little bit suspect in most of the world, Africa, Middle East, Asia, wherever you are. But you could say Americans cannot be trusted. Well, what? And people from Jamaica are unreliable. They're always late, and the French and what? I mean, every culture. Oh, and people from the United States, they just talk way too loud. Well, we're overgeneralizing. That we're guilty of a logical fallacy. Well, I met a couple of Americans, and they weren't trustworthy, and therefore Americans are untrustworthy. Well, you may be right, but not with that reasoning. This ties in with the point about hypocrisy. You just can't fall to the level of these ad hominem kind of generalizations. But there's so many world religions, many people say. Well, what's your implication? Well, if there's one religion, maybe it's right. If there are 10, I don't know. If there are 1,000, I guess none of them's right. I'm not sure that's the right conclusion, though I certainly understand the mathematical proportion. I mean, if there are many world religions, and even Christianity is subdivided or divided, to be less euphemistic, that could mean that they're all on the wrong track. But there's quite another way to look at this, and that's that everyone's looking for something. This world, this life isn't enough. That's more of a C.S. Lewis kind of argument. You think of the argument from Desire, if you've read Mere Christianity. The fact that everyone's looking doesn't mean that there's nothing to be found. I think that's the implication. The critics will imply, well, there must be nothing there. I think that's it. I understand where that thinking begins, but to hold to that in the face of the evidence and really comparing the various religions doesn't work. It seems to me more like an excuse. It's a lazy thinking. And someone said that tolerance gets a lot of the credit that really should go to apathy. Oh, you're so tolerant. No, you just can't be bothered to read any other scriptures. So you just say, well, whatever. Laissez-faire. I don't want to look at it too closely. Yeah, I think tolerance gets a lot of the credit that should go to apathy. Another false issue, and all of this is preparing the ground for why we can believe in God of the Bible, is that, well, scientists don't believe. And usually it just stops right there. Are you going to accept that? I mean, particularly if you're talking about scientists, you should know the importance of defining terms. What do you mean they don't believe? You mean they don't believe in what you believe and they're not a member of your church? Well, that's probably true. But what do you mean they don't believe? They don't believe in a God? I believe the evidence, and I put this in my book, Compelling Evidence, but the evidence that scientists believe is actually pretty good. If you mean that, do the majority of scientists read the Bible the way that Bible-centered Christians read the Bible? No, that would be the minority. And I don't know what minority, maybe it's 1/3, maybe it's a little bit more. But it's simply not true that scientists don't believe. Scientists, they're not going to believe that the world was created the day before yesterday or 6,000 years ago. But then should they believe that? You see, the majority of scientists actually do have faith, the evidence I put in my book. And I think the proper response to the evidence, when you look into a telescope or a microscope, when you look at the macro scale, into deep space, think Hubble, or at the microcosms that we see in a scanning electron microscope, the correct response is something that approximates worship. A couple of years ago, I guess it was almost 2 years ago, I spent time with a Jewish professor who was a father of a member. in another country. And when I was in the country where the guy was, I met him, and he's an atheist, and we talked for 90 minutes, and he does not believe in God. But I really tried to engage him, give him a chance, also because he believes he's going to die very soon. Let me tell you what we agreed on. We agreed that the more you study science, and he is a scientist, the more you see, the more humble it should make you be. We're not the end-all of this cosmos. There's something exciting, inspiring. And it's really hard, I think, to look into the microscope or the telescope and not use language that is charged with spiritual nuance, because that is a natural human response to fall down and worship. So I think science actually pushes us towards God, not away. And then, of course, when people say, oh, don't believe in the Big Bang, that's the enemy of faith, that's ridiculous. I mean, if anything, the Big Bang is, the current version is very strong reason not to throw away your faith. And I think you can say the same about biological evolution. Many people say, well, evolution disproves Genesis. Well, firstly, that's not true. They're really talking about very different things. And they say, yeah, but the creation account in Genesis happened in 6 days. I say, well, wait a minute. That has strong poetic character. But you're talking about that creation account. There are about 7 creation stories in the Old Testament. I mean, they're all true. Even the one where the earth is put on top of pillars. They're all true. They all convey the truth that God wanted them to convey. But I think we're making a category mistake if we take something that's poetic or semi-poetic and then try to pit that against something, say something in the area of physics or biology, and say, look, it contradicts. You're way off. That's like saying a love poem contradicts a marriage document. You don't get it. You really don't get it. Evolution doesn't disprove Genesis. Besides, evolution is not about the why, it's about the how. So all scientists can do, in a sense, is walk in God's footsteps, understand how things work. But the why, the question that means more to us existentially, that cannot be touched by science. Science really can't talk about that. Last year, it seems like every year I get to meet someone who's influential or connected. Last year, it was a couple times I was able to meet Francis Collins, probably the foremost scientist in the United States, whose book, The Language of God, really how the evidence of DNA and evolution points strongly towards God. That book has helped so many people, and I got to meet him, and I got his autograph, and I got a photograph, and he's really an incredible fellow. I mean, I was flying back from Europe sometime last year, and the guy I was flying next to, we were chatting, and he said, Francis Collins, he's my boss. I work for him. Oh, wow. I said, I would like a copy of your book, Compelling Evidence, and I'll get one for Francis too, because when I met him, I didn't give him my book. And I was talking to this fella, and he said, yeah, I used to live in Sweden too. We had some things in common. And he said, I'm presenting to the United Nations day after tomorrow. I mean, let's not isolate ourselves from the intellectual world. And anyone who still thinks evolution is somehow the opposite of the Bible is, I think, making a huge mistake. I won't say any more about that right now. If there's a God, why is there so much evil? This, of course, is the big one. This is the big one everywhere, and certainly worth many lessons. Starting a couple of years ago, my preference when I talk about the problem of evil, when we talk about theodicy, is to do multiple classes. I'll type the word theodicy to you just in case you don't know it. But you have the word theos, which is God, and dike is justice. So it's really, how can God be just, not justic, just, man, my spelling's terrible. Like, no, dike is right. Justice. Okay. It's a huge area. And when I teach that, I like to do it in multiple classes, at least 3, maybe even 6. Okay. But if there's a God, why is there so much evil? Rather than rushing to address that, I think there's a fundamental assumption that's being made when someone brings that up as a criticism, particularly an unbeliever, particularly an atheist. He's assuming that there is such thing as evil. I mean, I know I would sound perverse if I said, well, what's wrong with waterboarding? What's wrong with bombing innocent people, collateral damage? Is there really anything wrong with lying or rape or murder? You know, obviously no one would make that argument except some philosophers. I mean, some Nietzschean philosophers, perhaps. But if the atheist assumes that evil exists, what gives him this confidence? Now, I believe it is a reality. It's an existential reality, even for atheists. When I spoke in Oslo in September, it was very shortly after that lunatic, Anders Breivik, went ballistic. Remember, he had a bomb go off, killed a number of people by a government building, and then he went onto the island and gunned down scores of people, youth mainly. I mean, it was a massacre. And this is the guy, remember, he sent pictures of himself posing in commando gear. He released those pictures for the press. It's like he had his press kit ready when he did the massacre. When I was in Oslo, and I was staying very close to where that first bomb went off, I didn't have to be explicit about what had happened. I just alluded to recent events in Norway. Oh, the audience got so quiet. And I said, I know you could say there's no God and there's no evil, it just is. But things like that make me think that it's real. There's something there. And see, so when I'm making that point, it's not a tightly reasoned philosophical argument. It's something that can connect with people's hearts, because we've all been touched by it. Well, what do I mean in my comments here, looking at the screen? Does evil exist? For many unbelievers, yes and no. Because on Monday, they'll say, there's no ultimate good and evil, it's just the consensus of society. What's right for you is right for you, but it's not an absolute. There's no God. Don't appeal to a book or a being in heaven. There's no ultimate right and wrong, just what we call it. He says that on Monday, and on Tuesday, he's upset because, how could there be a God? How could God let this happen? If there were a God, he would have stopped this. Well, hang on. Which is it? Is it truly evil? The Tuesday version, or is it all soft and relative, like it's not really evil, the Monday version? And you'll see equivocation in skeptics and many atheists. They go back and forth. It's like they're double-minded. Well, I think they are double-minded. Good. I'll be surprised if you find one who's truly consistent on this. Because when you start talking about the language of absolutes, then you're talking about the language of God. Free will, of course, is essential to what it means to be human. We could talk about that all we want. I just finished reading a book, 4 Views on Divine Providence. Oh boy, talk about dense. There was the open theistic view, there was the Calvinist view, and there were 2 others. There was the Molinist middle knowledge view, and one view which actually was put across by a very intelligent guy. He's one of the elders in the Church of Christ at Pepperdine University, where I go occasionally. This book is incredible. I don't think we have to give the final word on free will and determinism or predestination if we're answering this question. But I think we should probably introduce the idea. If someone's talking about the problem of evil, say, well, how else would it be? If we don't have a choice to do evil, in what sense are we free creatures, libertarian creatures? In what sense are we even human? You don't have to give the answer, but tell them that you can't just say, we want only happy, smooth, pleasant outcomes. Life's not really that way anyway, and it's a dangerous universe. And this is where I'll talk about the volcanoes of the world. Often I'll use the illustration. When I go to Italy, often I go down to Naples, and I'm at Mount Vesuvius. Well, Napoli, the city of Naples, is just it's really in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, which is due to erupt. And I would guess 1 million, probably less than 2 million, probably 1.5 million people live really close to Mount Vesuvius. And when it blows, and blow it will, people are going to be talking. And there'll be plenty of people pointing their finger at God. How could you let this happen? And of course, God could say, well, how could you be so thick? Why did you build on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius? So we have to take some responsibility. We know the world is dangerous. Well, wait a minute. But why did God make a world with volcanoes? Well, there has to be a vent for the, the hot metals, the molten metals, and magma at the core of the earth. Why does there have to be a vent? Well, it'd be very bad if there weren't. Well, yeah, but why does it have to be so hot? Well, there are reasons for that, but we can't go into all this right now. I'll just say, if there were no metallic core, then we wouldn't have, you can see my hands, we wouldn't have this magnetic field around the earth that prevents us from being fried, cooked by cosmic radiation. So, well, maybe God should have no cosmic radiation. You mean no quasars and neutron stars and stars? Where does this go? It's a dangerous world. We have to have weather. We have to have storms. If there are no storms, there would be no life on the planet. There would have been without any mixing in the ocean water, there'd be no life in the seas, and then there would have been no life on land, and it just goes on and on. So it's a dangerous universe, and Bible says, follow us and you'll be safe. In some ways, you may be less, but we have a different kind of security, and we don't deny it. Christians are not idealists who say, no, it's peachy keen. God always protects the true believers. No, we admit it's a dangerous universe, and we also think it's an unfair world. And that, I think, is one of the strongest reasons to believe in God and an afterlife, because justice is served. The evil prosper, Psalm 73, and no good act goes unpunished, right? Right. So the good people are not rewarded. Then they say, well, religion is a crutch. That's another false issue. It's a crutch. Well, I guess it is a crutch in a way. Everyone has a crutch. Everyone leans on something. For this guy, it's his girlfriend. She's about to break up with him. He doesn't even know it because he's leaning on her so hard. This other guy, he's an atheist, but he is so into Dungeons and Dragons, it's like a religion for him. And this woman doesn't really believe in God, not the way we do, but she has her crystals and her astral projections. Religion's a crutch? What's your crutch? Politics? Right now in my country, a lot of people are going nuts trying to figure out who can be the next president. And these are people, of course, mainly who claim to be Christians, even though the Bible discourages us from, putting our eggs in that particular basket. Hey, everyone has a crutch for the strong and the weak. Now, I want to show you a picture, this was amazing. This came out last summer. And when I first lived in Sweden, a friend told me that they call them elk, Ellie, and I'm sure you would call it a moose. But they like humans, they like a buzz. And mooses, like horses and others, they'll eat apples. But if they can find a tree where the apples have started to ferment, they binge on it and they get drunk. Well, this picture is from the city of Gothenburg in Sweden. A family heard a noise in the middle of the night. They go into their back garden, and this moose is there. He's caught in a tree. What happened? It's an apple tree. The apples had been fermenting. He's completely stoned. That they really like this. And by the way, if you never heard, I think you probably have heard of this, being Canadians. But when our dog Bailey, who's at my feet right now, when she was a puppy, just to see what would happen, I once poured beer into her water bowl, and she licked a few times, and she was all over the place. So I know that dogs are sensitive, and I assume moose are sensitive too. So they called the authorities middle of the night. They extricated the moose from the tree, but he was just too hungover to be returned to the forest. So they let him sleep it off, and they took him back the next morning. Well, that's a moose. Come on, you know very well that this could be a human, right? I mean, how are we different to the animals? The Bible describes us as being created by God in the image of God. I guess there's debate about what that means. Are we his representatives, or is it talking about our spiritual qualities? But whatever it is, Genesis, however you interpret Genesis, we come late on the scene when the animals are created. In another image, we're created from dirt. Adam is from Adamah. Our name is Dirty because we're from dirt. Or I'll call you not Brian, I'll call you Dusty because you're from the dust. I'll call you Earthling because you're taken from the earth. I'll call you muddy because you're taken from the mud. You get the idea. So there's no room for pride here. We're made from grit. We're made from dirt. We're part of the physical world very much. And we're part of the animal world, but we're called to rise above the animal world. Many will say we should do what's natural. Well, if we do what's natural, then surely it's okay to kill other people. It's okay to eat our young. After you mate with your husband, devour him, like some of those spiders. It's natural. One guy debated a couple times. He said homosexuality is not wrong because bonobos, they're kind of like chimpanzees. Bonobos engage in it. Well, yeah, there's some animals that engage in homosexual behavior. So it's natural. What do you mean natural? By the way, I think in Canada and the U.S., there's a lot of confused thinking. People say we need to be natural. But these same people often say we need to be green. We shouldn't trash the environment. Well, wait a minute. If you're just isn't it natural to trash the environment? I mean, to me, it would be unnatural to protect, to have dominion, to follow Genesis 1:28. That's what's actually unnatural. And that's proof of human history. And I think even for the natives before us, I don't think they were smaller in number, but I'm not aware that they made strong conservation efforts. It's natural to not be green. See, we're part of the animal world, but we're called to rise above it and not to just descend to the animal, orgiastic, egocentric level. And all this is, we're talking about God here, but we need to be better than that. We are like the drunken moose. Come on, admit it. We are. Reasons to not. I'm going to give you a few reasons to believe, and then we'll be done with this part. One, of course, science itself. We talked about this. Something comes from nothing. The Big Bang. Wow. That. However you interpret Genesis, this world looks suspiciously like there's an intelligence behind it. There's evidence of fine-tuning, the so-called anthropic principle, which you can read about on the web where you want. Is it more reasonable to posit behind a universe that has marks of intelligence and personality and order and design? Is it more reasonable to posit a personal and intelligent being or just nothing? I mean, if intelligence is real and personality is real and we're in a moral world, we feel like we're in a moral world, doesn't it make more sense that there's something, with true ontological status, a true intelligence or personality, a moral one, behind it all, as opposed to there being nothing? So I think that's actually a good argument. Absolute morality, I've already mentioned this. I'm coming back here. Sometimes here, what I do is sometimes I'm speaking with a translator, or maybe I have a microphone stand, and I'll say, look at the microphone stand, which is me. See, I'm 3 meters tall. And they look at you like, huh? I say, well, for me, that stand is 2 meters tall. What do you mean for you? Well, for you, it may only be, 3.5 feet tall, or 1 millimeter. Well, we can't just make up the units. We find the units, we find the parameters kind of set as they are, unless there's something external, in this case, a yardstick, a measuring tape or something, by which I can measure my true height, then it really is just subjective. Who's to say that I'm not 2 meters tall or 4 meters tall? I think you get this. Without an external reference point, there's no way to measure or to have confidence in the measurement. No absolute morality with an external reference point. Miracles, another reason to believe. Now, they're very rare in biblical times. Most people in Bible times never saw a miracle. They're very rare. But I think they do point towards the supernatural. Of course we should be skeptical. Of course we don't believe dead people come back to life. At least not naturally. The cynic towards all religion says, you're stupid. We know dead people, they rot. They become maggot food. And well, we know that. Christians don't think that dead people come back automatically. But we do believe that one person was resurrected, the first fruits of the resurrection, and that's an act of God. And the resurrection would be the best explanation for the origin of Christianity and the conversion of skeptics like James and Paul. I talk about this in my last debate and also my debate number 5. So I think we should be skeptical. When someone says, well, I would believe in the Bible if there are no miracles, turn it on its head. Often you can turn this around. Actually, if the Bible had no miracles, then there would be grounds for skepticism. I mean, here's the book we claim is supernatural in origin, and there are no miracles. There's no evidence of the world beyond. There's no invasion or intrusion or intervention. Or that just looks like a good book of human poetry or something. The fact that there are miracles is, I think, an expectation. This is from God. God reaches out to man in Christ. I've experienced that. Now, this is back to the comment about my lenses. Someone could say, I haven't experienced him. But that's not a logical argument. You can't say, well, I haven't experienced God, or I don't know Jesus, therefore what? The most you can say is, you don't know. When I first lived in Sweden, they ate reindeer. Well, they still do. Of course, in some countries that's considered to be really bad. It's like when I was in Vietnam a few weeks ago, they asked me, you want dog? We'll get you dog. No, I still have never eaten dog. But I've eaten reindeer a number of times. My wife used to make a great reindeer stroganoff. So some people, they can't believe that you would eat, I think, caribou. Okay, let's say caribou. I never experienced it. I've never eaten it. Therefore, that experience is unreal. Well, no, hang on. That's illogical. Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it's not real. Millions have, and spiritual experience is ubiquitous. It points to reality beyond this world. So we'll take time. We'll take a few questions, and in the second part, which we're scheduled for in early March, we're going to talk about some reasons we can believe the Bible is not just true, but uniquely true. But today, we're at the reasonable concept of God. First, we cleared away. We had to do some deconstructing, get rid of some of the debris. And then I'm saying there are a number of reasons that point towards the existence of God. Of course, we could add more. The power of the Bible, which you read it, you experience that. The nature of Jesus Christ as God's disclosure to us. The history of Israel, prophecy. And we can add to the list. The goal in an apologetics presentation is not to give everything you can think of, every reason, and then you can't answer any questions because you've spilt the load, dumped the whole load. It's more to tease them. It's more to introduce the idea. It's to show them that there are good reasons for faith. I hope that's helpful to you, and now we can have a couple of questions. Oh, and you could, we could do them orally, or you could type the question in the box and send it to me, and then I'll read it. Either way. And Brian, how long do you want to take for this? You want to take 5 minutes or 15, or I'm somewhat flexible. You just tell me what you think is best.
I'm extremely flexible. I don't have a lot prepared to follow up with what you've said, so we can take as much time as there are questions.
All right, let's see how it goes then. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, great.
Well, I've got a question. Can you hear me, Douglas?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. It's Michael here, and
hey, Mike.
I appreciate what you shared, and I agree that one of the huge barriers we find in our world is the problem of pain and suffering. And even in your book, you actually allude to some of that in your introduction, the shocks to faith that you went through in years past.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there were many helps that you received that you probably didn't have time to explain in the book fully. What were some of the things that were related to you at those times when those various tragedies happened that helped you in your walk with God, through ministers or even just through the Bible itself?
It's interesting when some of the tough things I've been through were not met by any help from ministers. Like when my sister died back in 1984, we weren't equipped to deal with that. I had the conversation, I need to fly to the United States for my sister's funeral. I'll try to be back quickly. Is it okay if I just go for the weekend? And the answer was, no, you can go for a week. It's fine, But there was no counseling as such. What helped me was talking to an older man who's a friend of my well, my father's now dead, but he was a friend of my father's. He helped. And he helped me to see that struggling and questioning is not wrong. And I experienced in 1984, my mind opened up to all kinds of ideas. And it wasn't I was trying to defend my sister, but it sobered me. And I just got pretty honest, like, wow, some of the arguments I'm making in apologetics they're weak. They're not good. I started consciously entering into dialogue with atheist scientists that year. So it's not connected the way you would think. And again, there weren't that many ministers around in 2003 when we moved, 4 times in that year. We lost our jobs and we were in another country, and that was quite a year. Most of the minister friends I called were in such a state themselves that I don't know which blind person was helping which blind person, but I found help from my friends I've never met, but I read their books, like Townsend and Cloud. So there's a lot of stuff out there. And I think God sometimes ministers to us, not through the professional ministers. And sometimes there are resources that will really make a difference. And in fact, part of AIM is counseling. And I'm not going to, I think I'll stretch I'm kind of tethered to the computer here, but I got 2 more new counseling books 2 weeks ago. And the same week, my wife got 3. So I'm a member of the American Association of Christian Counselors, and that helps. It's all about perspective. It's not a slam dunk single answer. Of course, if there's an answer, it's the cross. That's where God meets us in our suffering. But there's no cheap answer. So I hope that's helpful, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Any other good books about DNA and evolution pointing to God? Oh, yes, indeed. Now, the one I mentioned was the one by Francis Collins. I'm going into my main website. I have a whole section on this. I'm going to send you the link in just a moment. My connection speed is a little slow, but I go to my website, and then I go to books, and then the section called Other Recommended Books, which is broken into multiple categories. And then I click on the Creation and Evolution section, which itself has, 20 books. And I'm putting the link in I just sent you the link. If you click on that, you'll see a number of great books. And I would just buy all of them. No, maybe you won't buy all of them, but there are some really great books there. And in fact, I just read one 2 weeks ago. That one, it's not there yet. Hang on. It's by Peter Enns. I'm typing it for you, and it's called The Evolution of Adam. I would just say most of my Christian friends who are scientists are theistic evolutionists, or you could call them evolutionary creationists. So most of these books will be from that perspective, but they have a high regard. I mean, they fully believe in the Scripture, but they also believe that God is speaking to us in nature, because in passages like Romans 1 and Psalm 19, even Wisdom of Solomon, though I won't mention that right now, God does let us know something about himself through the created order. So a lot of people are really stuck because they're saying, well, nature seems to be saying the opposite of what God's Word says. Now, hang on a second. The Bible itself says that we can know certain things about the world just from nature. So let's not get all insecure. That would be my response to that one.
Another question I have, Douglas. I find this really exciting, and I think apologetics is really necessary, even in a concentrated place like our campuses. And I do a little bit of work on campus in trying to build a ministry here in our region. Do you have any examples you could share, Douglas, about how campus ministers, maybe in Georgia or in your travels, have engaged the lost on their campuses? By confession, I in myself, I think it's so much more easier for me to talk to the quote believers, if you will, and I find myself not wanting so much to engage the atheist or the Hindu or the Muslim, who, for the most part, won't want anything to do with Christianity. And so, looking for some inspiration there. I don't know if you have any examples of how ministers have engaged these groups on their campuses?
Well, like in our movement, I don't think a lot of that happens. I think they seek out people who already believe in the Bible. But if they're too religious, like flaming Pentecostals, or they're, hardcore atheists, they by their care for them and love, they may convert them. Usually not. They may get them to visit, but they're not really equipped to deal with them. And I think we need a lot more training in that area. I'm sending you one more link right now. This is the PowerPoint by my friend Dennis Lamara at the University of Alberta, and we were roommates at a Evidences conference a couple years ago. We've been in touch for years. But if you've never watched his PowerPoint, that could really help. Now, I'm not saying that's for everyone, but for someone in the sciences, watching a PowerPoint like Dennis Lamara's PowerPoint can open their eyes and see that, so much of the chatter, so much of the opposition between Bible and science it's false. It's false opposition. So I think we need more training with our campus leaders in apologetics. We need training in world religions, because as I say rather bluntly now, I've been saying this for about 5 years, your study series doesn't work. And what I mean is, for most people in the world, it won't work, because the majority of the world are Muslim, Hindu, or atheist.
Mm-hmm.
So most of them, you can't just say, well, look at this. Now you believe the Bible's God's word? Probably that's not going to be enough for an atheist. A Muslim, you got a lot of work through there. I mean, a Hindu, maybe, but you got to make sure he doesn't believe in Christianity, Judaism, Sikhism, Baha'i. I mean, they're like, yeah, of course I believe it. I believe in everything. We're not well equipped to help people with worldviews. So in San Antonio this year, I'm looking for a donor. What I'd like to do, I know there'll be well over 1,000 university students coming. I'd like to give every one of them a copy of Compelling Evidence, because we use that for campus ministry, and I think that could help. So most of my ideas about what would help university students are, well, they're there. That's for the people who are thinkers. Now, most university students don't really have a lot of issues. If you just tell them, hey, the Dead Sea Scrolls were written before Jesus, oh, wow, there's so much evidence. That's it. You've answered their question, and they're never going to read a book on the Dead Sea Scrolls in their life. But for those who really need the evidence to help, and these could be some of our strongest supporters, we must be prepared. We need to rise to meet the challenge with better training in our staff, better training in our campus ministers.
Amen. Thank you.
Douglas, I'm wondering whether or not, is there any clues or signs in being able to detect whether somebody is hiding behind atheism or agnosticism? I myself was somewhat like that many years ago, and utilize that as a front almost to, put a veneer over your heart. But is there any way you would suggest that we can perhaps, better understand individuals? I know that's more of a sort of a psychosocial question than another.
No, but it's this area, effective evangelism or counseling. It abuts this whole area of apologetics. So it's a great question. I think if we show respect to people and don't do things like, let's look at Psalm 14. The fool says in his heart, there's no God. You say there's no heart. You're a fool. Are you going to be humble now? If we'll just show respect, then it's possible to find out what's in the heart. The purposes of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out, as it says in Proverbs. So we'll know if it's an excuse, if we've been patient, we're building a relationship. And with atheists, two things that I think are indispensable are exposing him or her to at least some evidences, and then also talking to him or her about the family of origin. Because, is that music? Okay. Because the concept we have of God is conditioned. I mean, every year I see new studies about this. It's conditioned by our relationship with our father, or in some cases the mother, but the father relationship determines. So finding out if the atheist had a close relationship with his father, he probably didn't. Or if he did, maybe it was too close, it was fusion, it was too permissive, or it was too controlling. They extrapolate. Their concept of God is is very much conditioned from their childhood experiences. So talking about that, the father relationship and evidences, I think for the atheist, those are key. Is that helping you?
No, that's great. That's very helpful.
Okay.
I have a question, Douglas. I'm also Mike.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Mike.
You mentioned that our study series doesn't really work. It seems to me, some of us, we have a series of studies, one for the average believer, one for the atheist, one probably for the Muslim. What have you done? Have you come up with a series of studies yourself? I know Brian Felisko was actually talking to me about a whole studies he did on John, just to help somebody.
Well, you're right, Mike. Yeah, there's no study series that will work for everyone. When I say yours doesn't work, I did qualify it. That's for most people in the world. Now, when you go to Canada, where you have people who are distantly from somewhat Christianized English or French background, or they're from the Caribbean background, you are in a sense talking the same language. But most people in the world are not Canada. I mean, most of the world is India or China or it's the Middle East. So, and that's what I mean. I'm not trying to deprecate any one study series. Maybe that's why there's so many, because one size doesn't fit all.
Okay.
In my book Shining Like Stars, which you probably don't have that, but that has studies. Oh, you do? Okay. Well, there's 65 studies in there. About 35 or so are for non-Christians, and you can tweak and tailor. And I think study series are good as a template. It's a starting place, but you don't walk around in Saul's armor if you're David. You're going to have to develop your own tools, have your own arsenal. So that's what I'd say.